Why don't we take the best of snowboarding and the best of skiing and combine them into a boot that affords mobility like a snowboard boot, warmth like a snowboard boot, comfort like a snowboard boot, precision fit like a snowboard boot, and yet retains the stiffness and the performance of a traditional ski boot.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Brian Ellwood, the CFO and COO over at Apex Ski Boots. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you,
Man,
Pat.
I'm so excited. We've been trying to get a time in the books for like a year now for this recording. It's great to have you on today.
I know. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, you're fine. I'm happy that you're here. That's all that matters. Yeah, what is Apex Ski Boots?
Sure. Apex Ski Boots is an answer to the marketplace's complaints about traditional ski boots. So, two longtime industry equipment designers that were mostly focused on snow sports got together in 2006, and they had worked in both sides of the industry. We see them as sides, skiing and snowboarding, and said, why don't we build a hybrid? And the industry hates that word too, but why don't we take the best of snowboarding and the best of skiing and combine them into a boot that affords mobility like a snowboard boot, warmth like a snowboard boot, comfort like a snowboard boot, precision fit like a snowboard boot, and yet retains the stiffness and the performance of a traditional ski boot. And that was the design goal in 2006. Took 3 years to get a marketable product together. Apex went on the market in 2009 with their first generation of ski boots. And we've been on the market, Colorado based since then, and have gone through 4 generations of design improvement and evolution since then. But that's what is Apex Ski Boots. That's what we strive for. And the skiers that have the guts and the interest in coming over and trying a very different, innovative product never leave the product, are lifelong customers. So that's what we are.
That's amazing. And even just anecdotally, I was actually talking to a past podcast guest, and Brian, you guys came up in conversation at some point, and Katya mentioned she was like, "Oh, Apex ski boots, I love them. I use them. They're my ski boots." So, just one of the many examples of people that really love the product.
It's amazing. It's rare. I mean, because of the size of our company, we still, going into our close to 20 years on the marketplace. We'll be there soon. We have people arrive to us all the time and say, well, why don't you guys think of this earlier? And we did think of it earlier. We've been around for a while, and it's always nice to run into people who know about us and ski in us.
Absolutely. So your story of getting started there is very fascinating. You started there, 2015, let's say, and there was a lot changing in the company, like
Yes.
right at the time that you started. Give us a little more context. What was going on? What's changed since then?
Well, it's a pretty unique, not too unique for me. I was outside of the industry. I was running, I was a consultant at the time, running a lot of different nonprofits, making sure that they were neat and tidy. And I had been involved in other small businesses in the Colorado area leading up to that. And I knew a couple board members of Apex, and the founder and his management team were asked to step down at the time because of management disagreements with the board of directors. And so I was brought in basically as an operations small business specialist by the board of directors to clean up what they saw as a little bit of a messy situation, operationally speaking, and to take the focus of the company from a wholesale model to more of a direct consumer model, which at the time had never really been done with ski boots. There isn't a company out there, at least at the time, that was selling direct to consumer as a brand. Now, you could go to REI and buy a pair of ski boots at the time, of course, but that's sort of secondary. That's not direct to consumer. So that was my mission. And I was hired in September of that year. And anyone in the industry knows that September, you're already full force. And if you're starting in September, you're already behind the eight ball. So the phones were ringing, the emails were coming in, and I learned to fly the plane while rebuilding it.
I love it. So a couple things I want to dive deeper into within there. So at the time that you joined, you guys were like more or less all wholesale. Why were you interested? Because you had established wholesaler relationships. They were selling a lot of units. Why push to go D2C from retail? What was the downside you guys were seeing from wholesale?
Yeah, there were two big concerns. The wholesale channel, we had been knocking on those doors for 6 years, and we had some, we retained some of the larger customers. Very expensive to service that channel. So we had a sales force that was on the road a lot, and being on the road, anyone in business knows, is expensive. Their commissions were expensive, the sales force, that is, and the margins were very compressed. So you're making less money for a very expensive channel. And they had tried that for 6 years, and the channel wasn't growing. Now, if the channel was growing, for a small company, 3x to 5x every season, and it was measurable, and you had confidence that even if you're burning cash, you're going to catch up to it because of a consistent growth pattern, great. But that wasn't there. It was sort of flat. So you're throwing money at this thing, you're throwing coal in the furnace. It's not getting any warmer. So there was the problem of cash flow concerns, a cash burn, and a really expensive channel that wasn't growing. So it's sort of, it was a development of a new channel with higher margins out of necessity. Another thing that was really the issue with wholesale is we have a very differentiated product. It's unlike any other product on the market, particularly at the time. Some traditional boots now have incorporated the BOA lacing system that we have in our boots, but at the time, no one was doing that. So it was very differentiated, very strange to those that had only known traditional ski boot technologies. So the sales forces that REI employs or Sun and Ski employs didn't really know the product, were intimidated by the product, and wouldn't go to it first. The industry is very tradition bound. Anyone who's in it knows that. And so coming in and disrupting it and asking those people that are sort of married to the tradition, the sales forces on the floors of REI, et cetera, asking them to kind of join your disruption was a big ask. So that's why we weren't seeing a lot of growth in the channel, is we weren't gone to by the sales force that we couldn't control. So another benefit of going direct to consumer is that we could now, if we focused on that, we could now speak to prospective customers directly, educate them about our product, get them in the right size, tell them the benefits personally, and really control that line of communication with the consumer. We weren't at an arm's length hoping that a stranger that we've never really met in REI would sell them our product. So we regained sort of the lines of communication.
You started an e-commerce business because you had a great product, not because you wanted to become a full-time marketer. But here you are, spending a few hours every week trying to figure out Facebook ads, SEO, content marketing, instead of doing the things that are actually going to build the business. At Intergrowth, we take customer acquisition off your plate entirely. No more managing meta ads, no more running SEO. We handle all of the customer acquisition for you, so you can get back to doing the things that actually move the business forward. If you're ready to stop being your own marketing department, go to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. And the thing I love about that is I think that there are a lot of brands that start out D2C that kind of think, getting into big box retailers, that's the dream. Once we do that, we've made it. We've had, some guests on the podcast that have brought up some really good points in the past to say, hey, once you get into a retailer, it's a lot of work to maintain those relationships. But what I'm hearing from you is, yes, getting into retailers was really great, but the upside was nowhere near as extreme as I think a lot of people might assume.
Right. You think that, REI is a large scale. So like They have stores across the country, but you're only going to be, if you're a seasonal product, you're only going to be in a certain amount of them. And you're going to spend a lot of money and time, particularly if your product is unusual, like ours is, and disruptive, like ours is. You're going to spend a lot of time and money trying to educate those who are educating the consumer. So that you're sort of, and that may or may not work. It has varying degrees of success. So REI has been a long time customer of ours. They sell a certain amount of our boots, but because the sales force, is at an arm's length from us, we travel and educate them, but that doesn't mean they're listening. That doesn't mean they're going to necessarily try to get consumers in our product. So there was a lot of lack of control there. And I think as a disruptive company, what I think is the best move for a disruptive young company is to really embrace having a direct line of communication with the potential consumer. And I mean, I can't tell you, since we've gone direct to consumer and we've created a customer service center here in Golden, Colorado, that's staffed by a core of 6 people who know ski in our product, know our product through and through, have been working with me for 6, 7 years. Having that core of people, having no phone tree, no hold music, like you talk to someone who knows the product through and through. They'll walk you through sizing questions, through product questions, through repair questions, etc., and have immediate answers for you. I think is a really, not only is it a competitive advantage because we live in a world where all of that is, well, now it's getting farmed out to AI, but it used to be phone trees and nothing. You couldn't find, you'd go to a call center where the person you spoke to didn't know much of anything about the product. So I think really honing in on, and it's putting your resources there instead of we shifted from putting our resources on a sales force that's roaming the country trying to educate the educators. We just said, we're going to reallocate those resources towards having a direct line of communication and having really high quality customer service and product support and sales support here in one location where we all sort of are at the same level and I can sort of maintain the quality of that communication. It's really important, I think, for any company to focus on that. And then, the REIs of the world will come knocking when you create a groundswell of demand or a groundswell of awareness. They will come knocking at some point. And, you used to do that at trade shows. Well, trade shows are pretty much dead. And so I just think focusing on your community through social media, through the telephone. I know everyone hates a telephone these days, but through the telephone, through email, like very rapid response, personalized email responses, I think is a very effective way to create a groundswell of quality and of love of your brand and your product. And then you have leverage to go to REI and say, look at what we've built. The proof of concept is in. We sold X amount of units direct to consumer. And REI will be happy to take you on because their ecosystem is very closed. Their customers are very loyal to REI. It's not like they're going to start coming direct to you necessarily. They want to sell your product into their ecosystem. So they have no issue with us selling direct to consumer, just like they have no issues with Yeti coolers selling direct to consumer, because they know in their ecosystem, people will buy Yeti products from them and they're not going to necessarily go to Yeti and buy direct. So, and that's how Yeti did it. They created a high quality, highly differentiated at the time. It isn't anymore necessarily product in their coolers. No one was ever going to pay $500 for a cooler. And lo and behold, here we are. And they created a status symbol. They created a brand. And then the REIs of the world were the Ace Hardwares of the world. We're happy to carry them as their exclusive cooler company, So anyways.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I've talked to a couple e-com brands about some of those tangential concepts, which one of the big themes I've heard come up with a lot of brands is they'll be hesitant, let's say, to like advertise their products, start selling their products outside of that main, call it like big box retailer they start out with, whether it's Amazon, REI, you name it. And I think the concern that I've heard most often is, well, we're afraid we're going to jeopardize that relationship. But I love the point you hit on that REI already has their ecosystem. They have those customers who are going to go to REI regardless. They don't want to buy an Apex ski boot set from you guys directly. They want to buy it from REI and have that experience. And
Yep.
I do the exact same thing with climbing shoes. I go to REI every year and a half, 2 years, ask the people there for their feedback, try on shoes there, and I walk out with a pair every single time. I know what shoes I like, but I still don't go to the climbing brands directly because I have that relationship with REI, and I'm not
Sure.
interested in changing it.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember a direct quote from the buyer at REI at the time when in 2016, 2017, is when we were like, okay, we're going to jump off the diving board in the deep end here and start selling direct to consumer. And there are going to be wholesale customers of ours that really don't like that. And that's usually the smaller guys that aren't at scale and don't necessarily have their own ecosystem, the standalone shops. Maybe they have 2 or 3 shops. That's, in my experience, the owner that is a little uncomfortable with you selling direct to consumer because they see that as stealing sales from them, which in some cases it definitely is. REI, the buyer at the time, getting back to the story I was sharing, when we let him know that we were going to really start pushing hard into direct to consumer and spending a lot of money and reallocating resources there, he's like, awesome, great. He's like, every dollar you spend on marketing just raises the awareness of your brand and helps my sales. So he's like, have at it. I love it. So that is paraphrasing, but pretty much a direct quote. And those bigger stores just do not feel threatened by smaller niche brands, even big brands. I mean, Yeti's a huge brand now. And it's the first thing I see in summer when I walk into REI is some giant, point of sale with just like a Yeti mountain of products. So it's a great example that I always lean into because it's the new sort of hybrid of direct to consumer. No one's pure direct to consumer. We definitely benefit from being in the wholesale channel. That's a big point of trust for a lot of people. And folks like yourself, you're loyal to REI. You go to REI, you're very familiar with them. You know their return policy, you know how they handle things. So the hybrid model is great. And I think, you start, like I said, and without repeating myself, you start direct to consumer and then sort of add wholesale on, and you continue both channels together.
Hey, listeners, if you're terrified about what AI means for how customers are going to find you online, I have some good news for you. SEO, Meta ads, Google ads, these platforms are still going to drive the lion's share of your new customers over the next 5 years. But these platforms are evolving. At Intergrowth, we help e-commerce brands to future-proof their revenue and to scale more profitably through SEO and Meta ads. If you're interested in learning more, book a free strategy session with our team at intergrowth.com/CGS. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. So let's go back to the early days of you working at Apex.
Yeah.
You start
The
the
crazy
founders of the
days?
company. Oh, sorry?
The crazy days?
The really crazy days.
Yeah. A
So,
lot of turmoil.
so you hinted at the fact that you guys were cash flow negative at the time. The good
Yep.
thing is, like, even though the founders weren't there, at least everything was documented for you, right? So it was at least an easy onboarding process.
Yeah, I mean, relatively. I was gifted their hard drives and some of the passwords worked, some of them didn't. At least the passwords to emails worked, so I could sort of game the system and find out or reset passwords through accessing emails that weren't mine and, just sort of jigsawing things together. But yeah, so there was no one to hold my hand, but I didn't necessarily want that. I love the adventure of being in a new industry, working with new people, with a new opportunity to explore that space. And I mean, they were really long days, and I'd come home and just immediately fall asleep and wake up and do it again until I got a grip on the industry and the business and its needs and where we were going to head with it. So that took a full season for sure, if not two. But super invigorating and a great challenge.
Man, I mean, great outlook on that. I was expecting a way more negative response when I asked that question. That's amazing, Brian.
I knew what I was
So,
getting into. I mean, to some degree. To some degree, you never really know what you're getting into until you get into it. But like 2 months in, I was like, wow, this is the phrase drinking from a fire hose is often used. And it truly was that, and maybe even more, because there was no even support admin. There was a part-time bookkeeper in place, but there was no like existing support admin that I could sort of glean knowledge from or ask questions of. It was just a big sales force that was out and about who sort of educated me on the product and its unique features. But there was nothing there. I sort of had to piece everything together. And the board of directors didn't know, they were just investors in the company. So it was a lonely existence to begin with, but challenging.
Brian, I love that. I mean, props to you for having that outlook on it. I'm very curious. Let's say going through that experience, I mean, it sounds like it was 1 to 2 seasons of, as you said, drinking from a fire hose, learning a ton every day, figuring out a lot of stuff on your own and working with other people on the team who had very limited context on a lot of the business operations. Let's go back to a hypothetical. Let's say you could have sat down with one of the original founders and you could have gotten them to write down a series of information about the business. Let's say you get like one piece of paper. What are some of the biggest items that you really would have been most interested in getting from it?
I would have liked to have understood, never having been in a product business, understood the channels and the flow. So the things that were the hardest nuts to crack were, how do you move product across the ocean from point A to point B? How do tariffs work? We were warehousing in Boulder at the time, but all of these sort of the nuances of moving product, like logistics, is would have been nice to know instead of having to piece it together, not knowing, not ever having experience with that. Also, the nuances of working with big companies like REI's, their EDI system, how they invoice, how they PO, how they invoice, how you piece together a shipment to REI, which is totally different from the ecosystem of another big box retailer, which is totally different from the ecosystem of another one. So like mapping out EDI systems and their internal shipping systems, all of that nitty gritty nuance would have been nice to be forewarned and forearmed with. But so that was the most painful and remains to be the most painful, to be honest, part of the wholesale channel specifically, but also the business in general. So yeah, I'd say that most than anything, not having experience with it.
I love it. So, listeners, the reason I wanted to ask that question is taking a really morbid perspective here for a minute. If you haven't documented these things for your business and you have, either a spouse, let's say you have a business partner who maybe isn't as involved in day-to-day operations, maybe rewind 2 minutes, re-listen to what Brian shared one more time. Make sure that there's like a single document somewhere in your database that's accessible to, potential individuals who might take over the company if you pass, if you need to step down, you name it. Really great opportunity. Take half an hour, write that stuff down now. It'll at least get you a starting point, and then you have that as a reference point moving forward.
Couldn't agree more. And I also would tack on to that, Pat. I know these are not exactly sexy topics, but it's sort of what makes I think a business successful is when you have these things dialed. Taxes and keeping abreast of regulation and making sure that there's some redundancy there. I completely agree with you that some other person should know not only about shipping, logistics, tariffs, and all the nitty gritty therein, but also sales taxes, particularly in direct to consumer businesses. We use TaxJar to help us with that, to pull information out of Shopify on an automated basis and take care of that for me and us. But even that requires maintenance and oversight. So yeah, taxes, regulation, and logistics, all of those things that make a business tick. And growing a business, you make a great point. As an owner operator, you're just going to sort of do what I did back in 2015 and 2016 and learn it organically as you go along. And having redundancy in those knowledge sets is invaluable for the growth of the business because frankly, if you want to take a vacation, if you want to get away from the business, it will follow you if you don't sort of have some kind of redundancy in that knowledge set.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your point about call it taxes and compliance, very broadly speaking,
Mhm.
those are, I would argue, those are like the biggest things to triple check. One practice I love to live by is if you're worried that you don't have things documented adequately, step away from the business for whatever time window you think it is that you need in order to see things start to crack. Some people that might be a day, other cases that might be a week. But if you do that, you'll start to see cracks emerge, and then you'll start figuring out where are you like truly essential to the business. And
Yep.
from there, you can then start saying, how do I have someone else who starts to take over these things? How do I
Yep.
make sure this stuff is documented so that this stuff doesn't fall through the cracks? I would really advise against not doing that for the taxes and appliance side of things.
Yeah.
Make sure you do not let those cracks form there.
Yes. It's really interesting. You really want the ultimate goal should be being a ghost in the machine to some degree for your own sanity and for the growth of your business, setting up systems. And I think it's probably the most challenging thing to do is not only finding the right vendors online or in person. That's hard. Uh, Setting it all up, front loading it is hard, but well worth it. The extra effort on the front end is always worth it. But I think it's probably the biggest challenge of running a small business that's trying to scale is what mix of humans that can help you and machines, online software is right and is really enables you to oversee everything. Of course, it's your venture, it's your baby, it's your whatever. Oversee things without those things overseeing you, so to speak. Like without those things grabbing you by the tail and shaking you, you're sort of, there's plenty of moments in business where you're going to be somewhat out of control, but mostly, the goal is to not go to sleep anxious, wake up anxious, go to sleep anxious, wake up anxious. You can build your way out of that, is I guess what you and I are both saying is that, attention to detail certainly, but really engineering a support structure where you're overseeing, but you're not in the weeds on it all the time. And I mean, it's taken me a while to get there, and I'm always tweaking and adjusting when better products come along or better people come along or a better system comes along. But that's always my goal is like, I just want to be an overseer. I want to be able to be elsewhere, certainly not tethered to a physical location, but elsewhere mentally and not have to feel a knot in my stomach because, I may have missed something or there's something pulling on my coattail. Like, got to pay attention to this, got to pay attention to this. So anyways.
Absolutely. Well, and along those lines of starting to like build the machine, I want to get back to one of the things you were talking about a few minutes ago, which is, you start out in the company, you guys are losing a bit of money, very focused on wholesale. You come in and the focus from very early on is how do we get into D2C? What did that transition process look like of what I would imagine was winding down resources that you were allocating to wholesale, figuring out how to do so in a strategic way so you didn't drastically cut off revenue coming in the door, and then
Yep.
starting to actually drive D2C sales for the business?
Yes. So, I mean, luckily we had the pressure of making it work or nothing was going to work. In other words, the company's back was up against the wall, right? So it was like, if we continue on this trajectory, it's going to be over soon enough, right? So when it's sort of like a sink or swim mentality, it makes those decisions you just mentioned less difficult because you sort of have to forge ahead to a higher margin, lower overhead model. And we did, even though, our sales force obviously hated the idea because it's not only their livelihood, they were just like, no one does this. There isn't a company on planet Earth that sells this piece of equipment direct to consumer. So that's a terrible idea, basically. So the sales force wasn't happy about it. The industry wasn't thrilled with it at the time because it was still in 2015. It sounds silly, but Amazon wasn't what it is now. Direct to consumer wasn't the standard almost like it is now. It was still sort of it wasn't as saturated in the market or as expected in the market as it is now. We had to wind down our sales force, which wasn't fun, as you might imagine, and then look at opportunities. The website was just like your basic, it was not set up for e-com. It was a basic, here's our product, it's pretty, go to REI. So there was no dynamic aspects to our website. It was very, very simple and lacked a lot of information about our product. So it was, reimagining. I was given a strict sort of dictate, make us profitable or else this goes away. So there was only one way to do it, and that was find more margin, and that was direct to consumer. And that was rebuilding our interface with our consumers, which was rebuilding our website, making it much more robust, finding a robust, platform that we could organize and sell our product on. Shopify was sort of the 500-pound gorilla, and for a reason, it's served us really well. And opening up our gates to the consumer, like establishing, there were very little incoming calls at the time. We didn't product support directly. We left that up to our dealers. So our interface, like cranking up how we were accessible to our consumers and our skiers and potential skiers. So yeah, winding down the overhead of the old system, letting our wholesalers know the direction we were heading in and trying to convince them that it was actually beneficial for everybody. Some of them got it, some of them didn't. And thankfully, the ones that got it were our biggest customers. So the cash flow remained on for that while we investigated how the heck we were going to sort of convert this business operation from purely wholesale to a hybrid model. And it was a lot. It was a lot of online reimagining, and it was also reimagining internally how we did things. And, we had a fleet of vans, for instance, that just sat around, that we were paying. We had monthly payments on throughout our off season that were all insured, that we paid on throughout our off season. We didn't need those vans in the new model. They all went away. I sold them. I sold them personally to individuals. So we liquidated our vans. Our company cars went away. A lot of people went away that were involved in the wholesale channel. And our biggest concern was, if this person goes away, what happens to all the relationships they have out in the wholesale world? Well, again, we found that that was sort of a paper tiger that never materialized. Those fears never materialized when we let a certain person go that was involved in the wholesale channel that was really expensive. Those customers stayed with us because of the product, not because of the person. So
Wow.
it was an interesting transformation that, again, the anxiety was mitigated by the necessity. You don't have time to be anxious, really. You don't have the energy to be anxious, when you're sort of this a dramatic example, but when you're in the middle of the jungle, half clothed and starving, you're not really anxious. You're so in the moment, you know, figuring out how you're going to feed yourself or how you're going to find water or whatever it is. You're not filled with anxiety because there's no waiting around. You're sort of in the moment seeking that thing. Not that I've ever been in the middle of the jungle starving, but it's the analogy I think is apt where like you're just so focused on accomplishing the goal that there's no anxiety there. So.
Man, I love this. I love this. Well, Brian, I was going to say, I know we're coming up on time here. For listeners that either one, want to connect with you. Yeah, let's start out there. For listeners that want to connect with you, want to learn more of your business insights, where can they go to find you online?
Well, I have a LinkedIn profile. I wouldn't say that's the best way to get a hold of me. I mean, I think just my personal emails, I'm not my personal email, my company email, which is Brian, Brian, at apexskiboots.com, would be the best way to do it. And then I think LinkedIn or my email.
Brilliant. And Brian, what about for listeners who want to buy Apex ski boots, who want to check you guys out online? Where can they go to find you guys?
Yes, a great question. So our website is great. We've invested a lot in our website, tons of information there, all of our current products. We're currently running a 40% off discount. So there's that. So apexskiboots.com, that's plural, skiboots.com is a great place. We also have a pretty robust Instagram following with a lot of fun content there. It's a little more lighthearted and offbeat. That's at apex_ski_boots is our handle there on Instagram. It's probably the second best place to check out. And you can always give us a call. Like I talked about earlier in the conversation, we have a super approachable philosophy towards customer interaction. So our number is 303-530-3340. And we have staff members checking it all off season long. And then certainly we're open 7 days a week, 10 to 4 during the season. So very accessible to anyone who's curious, anyone who's a current skier who needs help or advice. Phone number is great too.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And we'll add all those links to the show notes, listeners. Once again, listeners, this is Brian Ellwood, the COO and CFO over at Apex Ski Boots. Brian, thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.